Actually, what we're calling for, I think, is a more strategic spending. I want additional spending. This law needs additional investment made in it. We saw for the first time, after the law being on the book for 5 years, we were supposed to be helping all those years schools in need of improvement. For the first time in the continuing resolution, Chairman Obie put in $500 million to start to help those schools. The reforms and the changes necessary would have been a lot easier if people had had the resources to really bring them about. But we're talking about strategic investments in terms of assessments, strategic investments in terms of data systems so that schools can accurately measure the performance of these students. So they'll be able, as you know, as students move across districts in a city like New York, students may change schools 3, 4, 5 times, or in Los Angeles, or even in my state of California, or transitory workers, migrant workers throughout other parts of the country. We ought to be able to follow the students and have the information follow them, so when they come into a classroom, that teacher knows at that moment how that student was performing when they left the previous school or the previous district. Today, that's just not possible. The 2 slowest institutions in taking up, the advances in technology and data systems are healthcare and education. And they have highly mobile populations, and that information is incredibly valuable, whether it's in the diagnosis of an illness or the diagnosis of the student's problems. We want to help. We want to strategically help districts who want to use formative testing for diagnostic purposes, so that you'll know in real time if students start to fall behind, and what you can do with small interventions. Why do we wait a year for the end of year test that then gets to you 4 months later to decide whether or not the student is at grade level or behind or ahead? So these kinds of strategic changes, this is what we've learned over 5 years. Over the 5 years, we've seen a lot of districts, a lot of schools use their resources, rethink the process what they were doing before No Child Left Behind. In fact, rewrite their education plans and come up with some pretty exciting results in terms of achievement and performance in those schools. But these are the resources that they need to implement those kinds of changes. There's no point in going to a growth model if you don't know who your students are, where they are, and how they did. So you have to have a data system. The Secretary's laid out the principles of a growth model, the kinds of data systems that would be acceptable. I think now 12 states have passed that. They have different ways of doing that, but they're measurable, they're accurate, and valid. And so, we want to help the other states do that, and I think that's how we're going to do it. We're in a PAYGO system. We were able to find for that function, I think about somewhere between $5 and $6 billion new dollars. Chairman Obie has deployed some of it in anticipation of the reauthorization, the changes to help schools get ahead of it, so that the next 5 years will be more productive than the previous 5 years. This legislation really is about changing some of the arrangements we had and responding to the concerns. And we think that if we do that, you'll also have new energy in the populations of people who will be able to participate in the design and work in a system that is flexible to their needs. Again, at the end of the day, they're going to have to pass accountability, and they're going to have to pass high standards. But how you develop that, we see this this new direction much more of a partnership, and that's why we've tried to listen so intently to people at the local level. A huge number of the recommendations and the suggestions that we've received, certainly over the last 6 months, but over the last several years, are experience-based. People are talking to you about what is happening in their district in this time frame, and what impediments they ran into, and suggestions for improvements. That's why I said all of the business groups that helped us, and the civil rights groups and the education groups have been phenomenal. You'd be surprised how many individual submissions people have made to me, handed out to me, and given to the committee. So I think that clearly the American education system needs a new generation of investment. But so far, nobody suggested, I would suggest, but nobody has suggested a supplemental for American education. We've had the rock stars of American industry from the future, people from the high tech, the biotech field, come to Washington now year after year after year. and tell us that this is the most important thing on the agenda if we're going to be competitive worldwide, and not much changed in the last 5 years. We would like to use that energy, their credibility, to drive that next generation. All of those CEOs that we met with at the when we did the innovation agenda for the Democrats at Stanford University knew they were the inheritors of the Kennedy space program, because it built this huge infrastructure. 28,000 people immediately went to college free on graduate fellowships, so the nation could take their talent and use it. After they went to the moon and came back, they started building private companies that are now the hallmark of international, globalized, worldwide efforts in the advanced fields of today's and tomorrow's economy. That's what's at risk here. But right now, we're swimming in a sea of red ink that was left to us. We've pledged ourselves to pay as you go. We obviously put a priority on this within our budget, and we were able to eke out that additional funding. We would like to have, and certainly would be helpful if the president would commit, maybe in this last budget next year, he could commit to significant new monies for education if we pass this legislation.